ODOT's rail division down in Salem. Thanks for coming to our Oregon City High-Speed Rail Open House meeting. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to come. And we have many ways that we want your input at this meeting. There's 3 different ways you can participate. We have a board here where you can share ideas. We have a board in the back where you can use your little sticker to vote on what's your top priority. We also have a survey that's located over on the table here, which we hope you fill out if you haven't already. We also have it online, and we do ask that if you've already filled it out online, please don't fill one out here tonight. We'd like 1 per person. Just so you know, we've had really great participation so far. We've had over 1,500 surveys completed, and we have several more meetings to go. So we're excited about the interest and the feedback. Tonight, we're here to talk about high-speed rail between Eugene and Portland, and that same service continues on to Vancouver, BC. We will have a short presentation about what's happening today, what we're thinking about for the future. That will kind of set the stage for our discussion later today, and also for your survey and for your feedback. We also, after the presentation, will have a raffle. So if you haven't got a raffle ticket, we'll have a chance right before then to get you your ticket if you don't have one. So thanks for coming. I'd like to introduce Kelly Taylor, the Rail Division Administrator.
Thank you. Let me just echo what Betsy said and welcome you for coming today. And I just want to say that y'all look really comfortable, but I'm only going to talk for like about 5 minutes, and then the whole talking head presentation part of this meeting is over, because this is not a hearing or anything. I want to clarify. This is an open house. So this is more like when you go to somebody's house, it's an open house, and there's some cookies in the back, and there's people to talk to and mingle with. So it's not a question and answer, and it's not a hearing. It's a different kind of meeting. This is an open house. So I want to just clarify, you're only going to be sitting for a few minutes and then you'll be up. Let me just give you, now, most of you probably know some of this. You may not know all of it, so bear with me if I'm going to tell you something you already know. But I want to give you a sense of the history of the passenger rail service in Oregon and the things that have been changing in Congress and why we're even having these conversations and why we need the outreach and why we're starting to do these open houses. You probably all know that we've had state-supported rail service in Oregon since 1994. Oregon is part of the Northwest, Pacific Northwest high-speed rail corridor. Congress designated 10 corridors across the country, and we have one of them. Starts in Eugene and ends in Vancouver, BC. And Washington and Oregon have, since the 90s, been paying for the Cascade trains. Now, these are different than Amtrak's long-distance trains. You may be familiar with the Coast Starlight that runs between LA and Seattle. I'm not talking about that train, and I'm not talking about the Empire Builder that goes from Chicago to Portland either. I'm talking about the 2 trains a day that Oregon pays for that run between Eugene and Portland. But they also then go on up and connect up to Seattle, Bellingham, Vancouver, BC. And there's now 2 trains to Vancouver, BC. With the Olympics, they added the 2nd train. So I just want to know there's 2 trains that can get you up to Vancouver, BC now. Those trains have been paid for with state money. And the track improvements that we've made to date in order to be on the host railroad system, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, have been with state money, a little bit of federal money. Some of the station improvements have been federal money. But for the most part, it's the states doing it, because there has not been, until recently, any federal money associated with the rail mode of transportation. There's highway dollars that come to state, and there's transit dollars that come to states, and there's marine and aviation dollars that come to the different modes. But there hasn't been rail dollars. So what we're talking about is when the states wanted service, other than those long-distance trains, them paying for it. And there's 3 pieces to this. There's equipment that you need, there's operation dollars to pay for the trains to run, and there's track or infrastructure improvement money you need to spend. And the reason you need to do that is because the system that we're on isn't owned by the state. It's not like our roads that are publicly owned. The system that we're on is privately owned by the railroads, the freight railroads, who used to do passenger service, but wanted to not stop doing that. And back in 1971, Congress made a deal with them. We'll let you out of the passenger rail service, but you need to let Amtrak that we're going to create to provide that service on your system. And so the system that we're on today is owned by the tracks that they run on, Union Pacific. There are 7 large railroads across the country. They're called Class 1s by the size of their tracks that they own and their revenue. In Oregon, the main one is Union Pacific. We also have a little bit of the NSF system in the state too. But the lines that our Cascade trains run on in Oregon primarily are Union Pacific. And then when they get above Portland Station, Union Station, and go head into Washington, it becomes the NSF. So those are the two companies that we deal with. Now, there's a little difference. We've partnered with Washington and Amtrak to do this service since the 90s, but there's been a difference. We don't actually own the trains that we're using. Some people think I'm leasing the trains. I'm not. There's 5 of those Talgo train sets. I want to see by show of hands, how many of you have ridden on the Cascade service? Oh, golly, almost everybody in the room. Yay, that's wonderful. Okay. Those Talgo trains are owned, there's 5 of them, are owned 3 by Washington and 2 by Amtrak. We don't actually own them. We use them. And the reason we're allowed to use them is because there's 5 sets, and with the number of runs that are being made in Washington, there's enough time left over in their use in a day to make some runs in Oregon. So we have a contract, Oregon has a contract with Amtrak to use those trains down here, and we help pay towards their maintenance and everything, and we pay for the staff, but we don't own the trains. And that's really important. You'll look over here, there's a whiteboard here that says Series 8 passenger train set for Oregon. Now, Washington has been in a better situation than, frankly, Oregon has been for a lot of years. Oregon does not have funds to pay for infrastructure improvement things. We do have somebody that helps pay for the operation of those 2 trains. It comes from the custom license plates. How many people knew that I pay for trains based on custom license plates? Oh, quite a few. That's good. That's pretty new. That's only since 2005. Up until then, it was paid through general funds. But the law was changed. So the plate, not the background of the plate, but like your name on the plate, like if I had Kelly on my plate instead of ABC 123. That money that I pay to have some custom configuration goes towards the trains. But we haven't had money to do a lot of planning or a lot of prep work or to do a lot of the project work that would allow you to add runs, have more trains, have faster speed. Washington has revenue that comes from rental cars, and they also have some money that comes from part of the registration fees. They've got a lot of money coming in. They've been working with Burlington Northern for many years on identifying the projects that need to happen, primarily between Portland and Seattle, to improve their run time and to improve how many trains they have. And they're going to be upping their runs from 3 to 4 or 5. They want to get clear up to, I think, 13 or 14 in their long-range plan. Because between you and me, the bulk of the ridership happens between Portland and Seattle. We have some ridership, and they have some above Bellingham, but really the bulk of the ridership happens between Seattle and Portland. Well, when they increase their number of trains, that extra time I was telling you that's available that allows us to use them will be gone, and we won't have the trains to use anymore. So we had to position ourselves to buy trains, or we'd have to cut our service. We have ordered 2 trains from Talgo. They're coming. The series that we have today is Generation 6. And Generation 8 is the ones that are coming. And they're very similar in that there'll be a bistro car. You can come up close and look at this. There'll be a bistro car, and there'll be a dining car, and there'll be a baggage car. The one difference is the current trains in the baggage car can accommodate about 5 bicycles. These will accommodate 15. So I put more bike racks on there, but still had room for baggage. Now, the reason we're talking about rail and the reason things have been happening at Congress is because I-5 can't do it alone. We've got projections over the next 20 years of a very large population increase coming in the valley, about 1 million people between Salem and Portland. We've also got, once the recession's over, and it will go away, it will end, we'll have more freight business. And so we're looking at where can we build up the transportation system to handle it? Because it is a system. It's not just roads. One mode of transportation doesn't do it all. Now, we've been going along with the federal designation of at least 110 miles an hour. That's been the goal, of at least 110, incrementally, not just jump. Does anybody know what the top speed is? It's 79 miles an hour right now. That's our top speed on the corridor right now for what the tracks are allowed to handle. The 124 miles between Eugene and Portland that we pay for. And of that 124 miles, exactly 6 miles, you can go 79 miles an hour. The rest is a lot less than that. Luckily, those 6 miles are all together, so you can really fast in those 6 miles, and you got to slow down again. We go an average of 42 miles an hour. Now, that's not high speed. That's better than what a lot of states have, but that's not high speed. We've been going along with just our own money, and all of a sudden, 2 months into the new presidency, Congress and President Obama, Vice President Biden announced $8 billion of the stimulus fund for passenger rail, high-speed intercity rail. They have a goal. They would like to have an ongoing program to have America's system get beefed up and connect cities, particularly cities that are distances apart, that maybe people are using short plane flights, or for the auto traffic to be able to help, again, relieve some of the congestion, better for our air, etc. So they pledged, what he said is that $8 billion that he set aside was he thought would be a down payment. This is the president saying this. And he envisions $1 billion each of the next 5 years to go towards high-speed rail. We applied for some of that money. Washington applied for some of that money. We worked together on our applications and information back and forth. So did a lot of other states, because it was 100% money. You didn't have to have a match. So that's a pretty unusual federal offering. So as you might imagine, a lot of applications came in. I think 26 states or so. $50 billion was asked for against the $8 billion available. Washington and Oregon put in applications. Our corridor, the Pacific Northwest corridor, was granted $598 billion. Or, excuse me, $598 million. I knew that sounded too good to be true. $598 million. And of that $598 million, Oregon gets 8, and Washington gets 590. And you think, now wait a minute, how come? Well, there were some criteria, and there were some things that the feds were looking for. Because there wasn't enough money to go around to everything, and they really wanted to find projects that were ready to go and could show in a very short period of time what we could do with this program, they were looking for projects that had planning done and the environmental work done and were just ready to be constructed. States that had done a lot of planning. Well, we haven't had any money to invest in that because we don't have a revenue stream. We barely can keep the 2 trains going that we've got. We didn't have any extra money for that. Washington, on the other hand, and some other states, Florida and Chicago area and California, have had money to do some of that planning work, specifically the environmental work and all of that, and so they were able to get more money than we were. Now, I want you to know that it costs an awful lot of money to try to upgrade to something higher than what we have and faster than we have. In fact, when I'm going to talk about the goals in a minute, I'll let you know it'll cost about $2 billion to get there. So Washington gets 590. That will not get them to high-speed rail. Again, remember I talked about it being incremental, nothing just jumping from A to B. That $590 million is a series of projects between Seattle and Vancouver, Washington, or Portland, excuse me, Seattle and Portland. That will get them, they believe, 10 minutes faster of their run time, shorten it by 10 minutes, get their reliability from 68% on time to about 90% on time, which is good, and they hope 2 additional runs between Seattle and Portland. So, better, but not high speed. So I don't want you to think we've been completely left behind. We haven't. Our $8 million is going to go towards the Portland Union Station to do some work there, seismic work there, and roof work there, etc. And 2 congestion projects, relief projects in Portland on rail to do the preliminary engineering and the environmental work to get them ready for construction. Now, what do we have to do? Thank you. What do we have to do to prepare ourselves to go further and to be able to compete with the bigger What do we have to do to get ourselves ready to compete for the next pots of money? Because there's other pots of money coming out, but we're not eligible yet. What the FRA has told us, FRA is Federal Railroad Administration, which, by the way, is the administration charged with getting all this going. And they've never done this before. Federal Railroad Administration has not had money to hand out before. Federal Highway does it all the time with gas tax money. Transit does it. Aviation does it. All the different modes do it except for rail. So they've had to make this whole system up out of thin air and get it going quickly. Well, what they told us is one of the criteria is to have this environmental work done, an alternatives analysis about some environmental work and alternatives analysis so that they make sure that if they give you the money, it's been at least vetted at a high level and you have some sense of where your corridor really is going to be. Because if you're going to invest $2 billion to get these goals or even higher goals, you want to make sure you're putting it in the right place. Nobody's going to give you money to do it over. You better get it right the first time. That's a lot of money. And our goals, by the way, here's where we are today. Currently, on-time performance is about 68%. So get on the train, you got about roughly a 70% chance of getting there on when you're supposed to. Now that's actually not bad. We've had it less than that in the past years. It's a little bit better right now, but not for a good reason. Due to the recession, there's not much freight trains out there, so the passenger trains can get through a little easier. But we really don't want a recession to stay around just to help passenger rail. We actually need the freight rail system too for our economy. We want to get that up to 95% or better. We want to take the current 2 trains we have and at least get it to 6 trains each way, 6 up, 6 back. Some people say that's not enough. Some people say more. That's why we have the surveys. That's why we have the what's your priority and share your ideas. We want to hear from you about these draft goals. This word draft is exactly that. It means that. These are draft goals. And then we'd like to take the travel time between Eugene and Portland from 2.5 hours or a little bit over 2.5 hours down to 2 hours. I've had some people say in these meetings, because we're having 9 of these up and down the valleys, I've had some people say 6 isn't enough, you ought to have 1 every hour. I don't know if I need 1 at 3 in the morning, but okay. But I've also had people say you shouldn't have any trains. You should just stop this nonsense right now and don't have any trains. I've had some people say 110 miles an hour isn't enough. You ought to go 250 miles an hour or 200 miles an hour faster, otherwise you're not getting true high speed. Well, that's great if you're not planning on stopping anywhere too frequently. I mean, seriously, if you've got a long distance to go and you're trying to beat, say, air traffic, and that's your competition, yes, that makes sense. And you've got really highly populated areas between those points, great. But I've got Eugene to Portland, 124 miles, and I frankly would like to stop along the way to pick up some people. And if you slow down to pick up people, you don't go very fast. So it's a balancing act, is what I'm trying to say. We don't know where we'll end up with. That's why we're starting to do the outreach, that's why we're starting to do the the open houses. What we have to do, according to the feds, like I mentioned, is this alternative route analysis and environmental work. It is a federal requirement to get the money. No ifs, ands, or buts. We've tried going around it. We've tried saying, no, we don't need to do it. Some states have said, oh, we've done other past work, and they said, no, we want it needs to be current. This particular state is too dated. We want to update our rail plan. This is our 25-year look about both freight and passenger. And this is statewide, by the way. This is not just the Valley. There's all kinds of issues in the rail plan. We need to find funding. I mentioned Washington has some funding streams. Other states do. We don't. If we want to do this, it will cost money. When Europe has done it, they've spent money. If people want it, we'll need to figure this out. And I don't know with all the other competition for things that are out there and all the other issues whether there'll be money. But I will tell you that without the funding, we're not going to get it. It's just a fact. We need to do preliminary engineering and then construction. If we can do this part, we then can start qualifying to go after the big pots of money. There's about, is it $2 billion, Betsy, coming up? $2.3 billion is going to be announced later this year. We won't qualify for it because we don't have this done. We have just applied this month, May 19th, we put in an application. It was a small pot of planning money, about 40, 50 million. We put in an application to be able to do this. So I'm hoping that our application is selected and granted so that we can do that work because we can't move forward without it. It's one of the federal requirements. How much do we need? Well, these goals, we've kind of costed them out $2 billion. If we were to ask for the federal money, we'd ask for 1.6. He's only $400 million. That is a lot of money, folks. This is a lot of money. And it may not, I don't know whether there'll be enough support for it. What I do know in talking to the railroads is we have some options. When we do that alternatives analysis, and I want to talk about that, we've got 2 boards today in orange, one in that corner, one here, and I'm going to introduce staff in a minute that's going to be at them, talking about potential routes. I want to tell you, no route has been decided. We have to do the alternatives analysis. I've had people say, stay on the Union Pacific line. No, move over to the Oregon Electric line. Oregon is blessed. We may not have money, but we're blessed with redundancy in rail lines in this valley. We were actually kind of overbuilt in some standards of rail. We actually have some choices about where we might run these trains. And there's reasons why we may or may not want to be on either one of them. Neither one of them are a perfect solution. We can stay on the orange line that's the Union Pacific. The problem is, depending on how fast folks want us to go, Union Pacific has already told us in multiple meetings, very politely but very firmly, no, you're not going to go 110 miles an hour in our system. Absolutely not. We will not entertain that. If you want to have electrified rail in order to move away from diesel one day, we will not allow that on our system either. And they can say no and the conversation's over. It's they own it. It's like talking to your neighbor about, can I park my RV on your driveway because you've got more room than me? And they say, no, conversation's over. It's their property. The Oregon Electric line, it's got some potential. It's not perfect. I've had folks say, go up by 5. Just go up by 5. I mean, there's that grass median. There's all that room. Well, not once you get past 12 then. It kind of just turns on all the cement. There's not much grass median through those curves. So I'm not sure what I do. And they say, well, just tunnel. Just tunnel underneath Portland. And then pop up at the Union Station. Well, I'm not sure that's really realistic either. But it could be. I'm not saying there are tunnels. There are trains that go through tunnels. I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying we have to do the alternatives analysis. And we have to figure out what would be reasonable and what it would cost with the goals that people want. So, we know what we have. We have some draft goals for you to consider. We have potential route choices. Don't know what they'll end up being. We've got to do the alternatives analysis if we get funded. And we know, and I've talked to Union Pacific and I've talked to the other owners of the other line, we know it'll probably be either line to fix up about $2 billion or more. Probably more on the UP line, frankly, than the OE line. It costs more to interrupt all that freight business than to interrupt a small amount of business on the other side. The maintenance cost will be more because there's more freight trains over there. There's issues to consider no matter what you look at. So, with that, I'm going to stop at this point. I'm going to let Betsy come back up. Again, there's the board right to share your ideas. You have your little blue stickies if you didn't get a little dot to vote. Not that any one of those goals is not worthy, but just which is your priority about on time, more trains, or faster. Just want to have a sense of that. And it really depends on what county you're in. I found this really interesting. Portland was like, more speed and who needs to go south? You just need to get to Seattle. And they weren't worried about all the stops south. You know, not everybody, but I'm just saying that's kind of the general sense. Eugene was more trains. You need more frequency and a little faster. Everybody's been a little different. Kind of depends on your frame of reference and where you're at. Always just, you know, they were kind of like split here and there. It was pretty even. But so we need that. We need the surveys. They're online. Now, I want to introduce staff real quick before I go any further. I have Betsy Einhold. Betsy, wave your hand. Betsy has led our 2-year study on the assessment of the rail system that's been looking at the different routes, etc. She's here. Jim Cox, Jim at the back. Jim has over 30 years of environmental experience. He will help us when it comes time to do that environmental analysis. He can talk to you about what's involved and all the outreach that's involved, and there's a lot of public process with that. And then I have Bob Melbo in the green shirt and Charlie Kettering back here in the white shirt. Those two guys each have over 35 years of rail experience, both the big railroads and the short lines. They're going to be standing at the route maps. They can answer questions about the different routes and questions about the curvature and the grade and things like that. Because people ask me, how fast is the train going to go through my town? Don't know. It's going to depend. It's going to depend on the route. It's going to depend on the goals. It also depends on what the route can take. I will tell you, neither route, OE or UP's route, north of Aurora, can take 110 miles an hour. Just can't. The grades and curvatures are just not going to do it. So, unless maybe we were to go up the I-5, I guess. And I'm not sure it would do past then anyway. So, I'm just telling you, we don't know. With that, I hope I've given you enough to think about, because that's all this is about. This is just some nuggets to think about, for you to participate, ask us some staff questions. I'll be here too. I thank you again for coming. Stay in your seats for just another few minutes while Betsy does the raffle. Yeah, this is for Oregon. I would like, yeah, the what's your priority is for Oregon What's your priority on those goals are restated over there?
Who doesn't have a raffle ticket?
Make sure everybody's got a raffle ticket.
We have some top prizes up here. Okay, everyone get them out because we're going to do our drawing. And then we will disperse. Again, we want your survey, and you can stick around and ask us questions, or you can leave and enjoy your dinner. So.